Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Elitist Geek VR news for July 23rd. This is my 1 liter Stein. It's Saturday, right? Now, before I start, I just want to thank you guys and not make it sound patronizing at all. So I'm just going to quickly touch on this, but I get more out of the comments and feedback and links that you guys leave than I honestly do from researching in the first place. And that's just seriously appreciated. Not only does it make my job easier, but it gives me stuff to talk about, newsworthy items, fills in information that I, either wasn't completely accurate on or didn't even know. And then there's other times it crosses over into basically product review. And the Omni that I talked about last night, perfect example. So many of you left feedback on it, having tried it, about how loud it was and, a lot of the limitations, to the point where that's all I need to decide, pretty definitively, even without having tried it, that it's probably not the device for me. In other words, I got enough information that I don't need to try it to put the dots together that we're missing, right? So I appreciate that. I'll probably buy some kind of movement technology at some point. Not that it was going to even be this one necessarily, but it was something I was going to revisit in a year. Probably not now. I will look at other things in a year. Hopefully we'll have some new technology on the horizon, right? And then the last thing I wanted to say with regards to comments is, I've had people cautiously deliver their opinion. And you don't have to be cautious on this channel. If you have an opinion, share it. It's not trolling to have an opinion, in my books, right? If you deliver that, respectfully or, in a certain way, if it's basically threatening and you're forcing other people to adopt said opinion, well, that's a different thing. But having an opinion, hell, that's what makes A, this a free society, and B, a place worth living in. Imagine if we all liked the same crap and had the same opinions. That would be pretty damn boring. Again, in my books, it would be pretty damn boring. So enough of that. Let's get on with it. So the first thing I want to talk about has to do with Samsung, the South Korean tech giant. Does that even need pointing out, right? Considering that nobody would definitely mistake that for being North Korean technology. But yes, the South Korean tech giant seemingly has their fingers in everything, right? I mean, it doesn't seem to matter what VR solution you're talking about. Samsung has a hand in it, whether it's the Rift or the Vive. Samsung screen technology is everywhere, even on their phones for their own devices. Well, you'd think, and I touched on this probably about 3 weeks ago, that they were probably going to strike out on their own at some point. Well, it looks like we have a bit more conclusive evidence for exactly that, Samsung striking out on their own. A patent was filed, or not a patent, but rather a trademark, about a possible name and brand identity for the new HMD. The name possibly being Odyssey, Samsung Odyssey. So when I think Odyssey, I think either Greece or I think of Honda. So I don't know if that's the name I'd personally go with, but hey, nothing wrong with it, I suppose. What I like about it, though, is Samsung could be that kind of sleeping giant, right? That, everybody's kind of all eyes are on Sony to do their little thing with the PlayStation 4, which is hopefully going to be a big thing. And, I wouldn't count Samsung out necessarily. Look what they did with the mobile market, right? The way they kind of turned that on their head. And arguably for Android, they are to Android almost what Apple is to iOS, right? So don't count these guys out. If they create a new headset, I'm going to pay attention and see what it's all about and determine if it's something that I want in my line of HMDs. Now, Network's Neil Young, not the musician, but Network with a 3, says there are too many hurdles to sell VR to consumers now. I thought this was an interesting article from the point of view that I'm not sure I agree exactly with what his argument is, right? And, you know, one of the things that he talked about, let's examine that for a second, is, you know, he talked about the price points. Fair enough. Yes, at this point, VR is cost prohibitive for a lot of people. Granted, we've talked about that on this channel. Others have talked about that. I think we're all in agreement that at this point in time, it's still fairly cost prohibitive. We've also talked about the lack of a killer app. And whatever you want to call that, whatever your name for that is, we've discussed it. We're pretty much in agreement. There's consensus on that as well. But his other argument had to do with unfamiliar technology, right? And how that's not an effective way to market and grow a market, that you need familiarity for a product. Well, I'm no Apple fanboy, but I can't help admiring what Apple has done with regards to marketing, right? And creating a demand where there was none. They've proven it's possible. Others tried the phone approach, right? Or, you know, they did it slightly differently. You know, the Palm Pilot idea, the whole tablet thing. Apple came along and basically said, look, this is how you're going to get at the technology now. We're showing you a different way of doing it, and you're going to like it. And here you go, and thanks. And sure enough, consumers adopted it. We don't think twice about tablets now. And yet, tablets have been making attempts for 2 decades to enter the market, right? It's successful, pretty much thanks in great part to Apple. Phones, you could argue the same. Look where Nokia was with mobile gaming and their mobile phones. They didn't have quite that same vision, right? Now you've got Android and iOS all but replacing Nokia. I don't even know what their market share is anymore, but they were a giant at the beginning of the 2000s and even into the mid-2000s, Nokia. So I'm not sure I buy Neil's argument about that. I think going back to, you know, the technology, if it's the right technology, you don't need to have concerns. He also cited developers leaving the $30 billion mobile app market, or not developers, but investors rather, right? For virtual reality. Of course, there's going to be people who speculate. There's going to be people who try to set up greenfield operations, with regards to virtual technology. Absolutely. All of that stuff's going to happen, but it's not going to be at the cost necessarily of the mobile market. I think the two are going to be able to move forward in their own streams, right? So, interesting, his thoughts, but I don't necessarily agree with them. I don't really share them, but hey, that's okay. The next final thing that I wanted to talk about in this news video has to do with VR and comics. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I talked about Suicide Squad. Well, a reporter, Tanya Gonzalez, she's an author for CNET/reporter. She actually tried, at the current Comic-Con in San Diego, she tried that Suicide Squad and how it immersed her. Now, I'm a comic fan from way back. I talked about that in the video where I just did the little tribute to Stan Lee. I've loved comics. The first comic I ever got was a Conan the Barbarian comic. I was probably in grade 2. This was in the late 70s. And I remember curling up with that thing on the couch. I still remember it was in the 50s of Conan the Barbarian, original Marvel series. For anybody who knows, yeah, that's pretty freaking old. But John Buscema and Ernesto Chan, the two best Conan artists, bar none, my opinion. Your mileage may vary. That was it. I was hooked. And I got into Teen Titans, DC. I got into, Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, just all kinds of comics. Comics have been a huge influence for me, alongside gaming and video games, for my interests, my career path, all that sort of thing. So when I think about VR and I think about that Suicide Squad, she went on and did some speculation of her own in terms of where the technology could go and where, what are my own thoughts on where virtual reality could go with regards to comics, right? And people have more or less gotten used to the tablet thing, is what she indicated in her article, right? Having comics, she looks forward every Wednesday. I think she mentioned she has her new subscription comics. She reads them on the tablet. Sometimes she misses being able to thumb through them with your fingers, the feeling of paper, that tactile response, right? And yeah, and I get that too. And I'm pretty much almost 100% converted to ebooks and e-comics, right, on a tablet. Magazines, I love them on tablets. Books as well. But if you think about what VR could do for comics, there's all kinds of cool potential. And the Suicide Squad was definitely one kind of aspect of it, right? That feeling like think about it this way, okay? Pick your favorite comic. Let's go with my original one that I was talking about, which was Conan the Barbarian. And we've got this, the issue had to do with this cult on an island, right? A native cult on an island. They were cannibals and controlled by a demon. Conan ends up fighting them initially, then the demon, and frees them from the demon scourge by the end of it, right? Now imagine that relayed in virtual reality. So a couple of ways you could do that. You could have 360 style panels, right? And they're just static. You could walk around the panels, you could check out the panels from a seated cinema view, or walk around in that scenery. Then there's another angle to that, and that could be that it's animated, right? So you've got an animated panel. So it's part, kind of the manga with anime, but blended together. Now, these are hugely cost prohibitive at this point in time, right? The tool sets to do that would probably bankrupt Marvel or any of these independent comic companies out there. But I'm talking about what could be, delivered via games or apps first. Maybe it's a compilation. Maybe it's take a few superheroes and their best of and deliver it in this format. And then eventually, as the tools become more common, more affordable, maybe comics at some far future point could be delivered that way, right? There's always going to be a market for the traditional, I think. But I think there's an excitement about the possibility of what else we could do with the comic medium, right? What else we could do with film, TV, etc., without replacing the original, just maybe going alongside it. And that would just be, in my books, that would be awesome. Having a comic that you could bring the panel to life or leave it as a static, awesome 3D thing that you could walk around in. But anyways, completely nerding it up on that one. I am going to have a gameplay video coming up shortly after this, guys. Other than that, have an awesome Saturday. Cheers.